Hey guys, what is going on? It's Alexander Williamson here with Fishtory, and this is the audio-based weekly series where I bring you 4 days a week news and information about things going on in the aquarium hobby, whether that is breaking news in the world of freshwater ecology, saltwater ecology, engineering, biology, physics, astrobiology, whatever it may be. If it has to do with fish, fresh water, or ecosystems that intersect with our hobby, I like to talk about it. And in this series, if you're new, you can watch the entire series all in one go, basically in 4 segment units. Each episode is somewhere between 3 and 10 minutes long usually, and basically we cover different aspects of things that are in the news, breaking news as it's happening. And as today's episode holds true, we are going to be revisiting and updating information about a story that we already talked about that was kind of a mystery. Now, if you want to support the channel and support this segment, whether you see it on the Aquatic Morning Show, hey guys, or whether you see it on my channel when it gets released later, you can support it by paying $1.99, and you get full access then on the community tab of my page, early access to all the Fishtory episodes. Eventually I try to release most of them, and you can catch them on the Aquatic Morning Show if you're not already watching here or there already. So with all that said, thank you so much for letting it continue this long, and it allows me to do work including preservation with the nonprofit that I'm doing and keeping my channel running alive and well. So let's get to episode number 128. So scientists suspect someone polluted the water with a substance that appears to have caused extremely high levels of salt within the Oder River. The Oder River is in between Germany and Poland, and we already talked about this last week in that there were, actually it was 2 weeks ago, but there were 2 major fish die-offs in a couple-day period, and they moved around 8 tons, so 16,000 pounds or so, of dead fish from the river. Well, things are getting much, much worse. Now they are moving hundreds of tons of fish from the river, and snails and birds and small mammals. Anything that is living in the river seems to be dying. And this river runs all between Poland and Germany. It's over 1,000 miles long with its tributaries. It is an unprecedented ecological disaster for Europe as far as river damage goes, according to both Germany and Poland's leadership. So it appears that high levels of salt were raised in the water, and that doesn't mean like table salt, but rather an industrial salt of some sort, possibly a sulfur type salt, which ironically is what we use to dechlorinate aquarium water with, but it can be very harmful in high concentration. But this encouraged golden algae to flourish, which along with cyanobacteria created toxins in the water and also depleted the water of oxygen at the surface and clogged areas up that normally have surface agitation. And combine that with high temperatures, and you've got millions of rotting fish now. And also those then cause the ammonia to rise, just like in your aquarium. And when enough things die at once, it is a deadly chemical chain reaction. They say that all this was extremely exacerbated by the hot summer and the high temperatures, but basically the never before seen low levels of this river also have caused this to be much, much worse than normally. So it's difficult to get a clear answer of what caused it, according to Andres Kapsuta of the Inland Fisheries Institute in Germany. And they were out testing water on the Oder River when he was interviewed by a scientific article, a man writing a scientific article right now, and it's been in pre-publishing on a vlog and blog setup that I've got links to. But the scale of the ecological disaster is unprecedented in Poland, he said. It is a catastrophe. We have never found so many fish and so many dead creatures, clams, snails, even mammals and birds. It's the first time it's happened. It's a serious warning. It's a wake-up call. We need to keep our waters sacred. So suspicion has fallen, yet with no evidence, on Polish industry and Polish mines. They don't know that for any reason other than just kind of rumors, and they haven't found a source. But the police have interviewed more than 200 people about this, and they're investigating 12 different sites that have pipes that have effluent that run into the river. There are over 300 sites that have pipes running into the river for industrial runoff. Now, all of those should be clean, or clean enough to run into the river, but that's not saying that they actually are, or someone didn't add something to them or throw something down the drain that was not supposed to be down the drain. And there is now a reward of, it started last week, if you saw this, around 200 euros, and now it has raised to over €1 million for information on the arrest of perpetrators. So fishermen who make a living off these fish in the river told the people writing this story that they saw fish dying in March also, but they weren't sure, if it was the same kind of thing, but that there was a die-off in March as well. And so now they're wondering if this is something that's happening, every 3 or 4 months and caused by industry quarterly or something like that. So nearly 300 unregistered outflow pipes on the German side, as well as the 200 on the Polish side, have also been found and either investigated or capped. And nearly 60 of them are still open for investigation, being linked on the German side to this leak. So it sounds like it probably did come from some industry putting water down a pipe that was supposed to be clean. It says that this is just a major warning sign that you need to react quickly when there's these spills. When you find 8,000 pounds or 16,000 pounds of dead fish, you need to react quickly, do more testing in labs and things, because right away they couldn't figure out anything that was super deadly. And in the case of this, salts killed some fish right away. Then it caused the bacteria and the cyanobacteria and the algae all to go crazy, which then literally created a chain reaction down the river. So just another warning to the world, to the entire industrialized world, that we need to worry about these things. Now, they said that the river is continuing to collapse, and as they're collecting corpses for incineration along the river, it's basically become a giant murder mystery. And from carp to catfish to game fish, they are also trying to keep the fish that are still alive in the river in certain pockets and parts and tributaries alive. And it's really hard right now with the temperatures and the water conditions, especially with all the ammonia. So they're working really hard to actually seed with good bacteria, and as well as aeration from giant pumps from fire stations and local municipal fire trucks running 24/7. So it's pretty amazing that this occurred from one dump or spill, and the fact that it was one giant wave of poison that did this chain reaction down the river is also kind of unheard of in modern times, unless it's something like arsenic or lead or mercury, and that was not the case here. Mercury was suspected at first, but it doesn't look like that is the case. So a man named Lucas Mijolgi gestured to the pile of corpses of carp and catfish that he had been collecting that day, and he said that most of the fish were 20 to 30 years old in the case of the ones he'd been pulling out, and that they'd been leaving the younger ones. But they, along with biologists on the scene, believe that it may be up to a decade before the river returns to being able to hold life again like it used to. So that's just a really bummer story. And they still don't know who did it, and they think it's salts, but last week they thought it was mercury. So this is something I'm just curious to follow. But in other news, we also have a new paper out in the Journal of Nature, and that is that there have been more fish die-offs in the last decade than in the last 5 decades put together. So in the summer, the heat gets hot, and in small lakes in Europe and America, the United States, Canada, and as well as like Iceland and other places, Ireland, that were in the study, these northern lakes and latitudes, they're getting too hot, as well as lakes in places like India and Africa and Mexico. All are getting too hot, and places where the fish used to be able to survive the summer, they can't anymore. So cold water fish, it's getting too hot. Even hot water fish, it's getting too hot for in some places. And the fish die-off just due to heat, when they know that was the cause, has gone up 500%, if you think about it, in the last 60 years total. So there's definitely a trend, and whether you want to debate global warming or climate change issues, it's really it doesn't really matter if you want to debate it. It's crazy to just look at the science right now that's already happened, of how many animals are dying and how many places are going to no longer be able to hold life soon. I mean, places that are man-made, including dams and lakes and things, they're also seeing the stress of it. And if you throw in any industrial pollutant or anything like this, any unintended disaster, landslides, things like that, earthquakes, all of a sudden you've got massive die-off, and the systems just can't hold it anymore. And so we need to be more careful about that as a race of humans. And we also need to think about what we do when we wash our cars, when we put, motor oil or antifreeze in the trash. Is it going to go to a site that's secure? Or is it going to sit in a landfill and then seep into the groundwater? Things like that we really need to be thinking about with certain chemicals and certain products, batteries, and even, the new quote-unquote green technology. We need to think about all of that. So I know this one went a little bit long because it's the first one, but thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Alex Williamson with The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium on Fishtory, and we are on the Aquatic Morning Show, as always. So, today we have an interesting study out of Oxford and Cambridge. They always seem to be working together and coming up with great old studies. But they have a study about hunting birds. And hunting birds led to hunting fish and schooling fish. And just follow me here. So basically, the study starts by looking at hawks that were hunting small starlings and sparrows. And they used to think that that when hunting, these predators would target the weakest one of the flock, or the youngest one, or the stragglers. And while that's the case about 20% of the time, the other 80% of the time, it's not. In fact, they seem to be waiting until the density of the group is at its highest by intimidating the group, and then coming in for the kill, and sometimes working together. This got scientists wondering, well, what about like lions and zebras? What about, tigers or other things like that? And they found with ambush predators, it doesn't seem to be something that they're going to invest money in studying in the way of land mammal ambush predators. However, in the way of fish, they saw a direct correlation. And that was that basically predatory fish, they aim for the densest spot in a bait ball or in a schooling or shoaling group of fish, and they actually pick their mark before there's even a bird there. So they can kind of predict where the densest group of birds is going to be in a second or two as they're dive bombing in or as they're swimming in. And this was first figured out when they took a camera and they watched these bats coming out of a cave, as well as swallows at night that are down near the ground, and they're moving around eating bugs like crazy. And they're trying to figure out how these hawks in Mexico were hunting these bats and these swallows. And they're in the Chihuahuan desert on the Mexican border and the New Mexico border, either side of it, when they were watching these things happen. And on this volcanic plateau, which is approximately 1,500 meters above sea level, they found these deep lava tubes where the bats would roost in huge numbers by the millions, and they would come out of these lava tubes every night to feed. And at the same time, hawks would just swoop in like crazy and ambush them as they're leaving these tubes. So they thought, well, this is a good predictable spot for us to watch an ambush. It's pretty natural. It's not in the city. It's not, going to be distracted by other things going on that are man-made. And so they took these cameras that were super high-speed cameras, and a person by the name of Dr. Brighton and their grad students from Oxford was filming these hawks hunting in high speed, and they took a high-resolution image of the skyline, and then later they would reconstruct the hawk's flight path in 3D space with laser trajectory, just like you'd use for plotting a site where you're going to do construction or something. And they were able to, with these stereoscopic cameras, kind of 3D matrix spin images of where the birds were at every, hundredth of a second or 200th of a second, however fast the cameras were going. And they found that the hawks would actually steer towards a fixed point within the swarm that the swarm was going in after they already started their approach, which would scare the group, and that then they would literally kind of close their eyes and just grab. And it turns out that that was a more effective hunting method in these dense groups of either bats or swallows or sparrows in some cases, where they later studied the same thing. And they were able to see that they're hitting the same point over and over and over again if you were to map it out in relation to the hawk. So when it starts its dive, it's like 200 yards away down in the air and maybe 10 yards to the left, and boom, every time it's doing the same pattern. And they can switch up the pattern or whatnot, but they were seeing that there was this pattern that they'd figured out for each of the bats and the swallows, and they're going in and they're grabbing them right out of the air, and that's how they're hunting. So when other biologists heard about this study, which has been ongoing before it was even published or anything, they wanted to know if swarms work the same way with everything from insects to fish. And so far, fish have gotten the grant. So they already are now working on studying fish. And while the study came out for the hawks, and they've talked about that, they said that the authors of the hawk paper suggest that the strategy is targeting a fixed point in a group of prey and being more generalistic with their mechanism of hunting, but they're yet to discover how these predators are doing so, or what formulations are made in their head, or instincts to calibrate why they're doing the dives the way they do them, when it's dense enough to attack, things like that. And they're guessing that there's probably a simple sort of algorithm that, when there's 1,000 birds that are this tight, or when there's X amount of birds in this area. And so they're just looking for that pattern and have computer projects that are trying to figure that out, as well as programs rather, as well as grad students over at MIT now are trying to figure that out. They're trying to look at the data and say, what is this modeling? Because it also could help with other things, like how do you get cancer cells that are moving through the blood? Like how do you target them and get the most of them without knowing where they're going to be at each second? But when they're in a dense enough area, maybe you can go in and just kind of grab some. So from nanotechnology all the way to systems delivery and things, they say there are applications for this that could be of interest to as well to industry as to the military-industrial complex, because of course they want to figure out how to do this with drones. I mean, duh. Of course they're going to do that. But the paper that was published officially, Carolyn H. Brighton, PhD. They don't say what she's a PhD in the paper, unfortunately. I would guess biology or something like that. She published in the paper of Nature Communications just this week, and you can check out more stuff about the hawks. But now I'm waiting to see the fish results, because they're saying that things like fast-moving fish are using the exact same strategy. They're not going after one fish. They're not looking for a sick one or anything like that. And there's actually a famous quote online that goes around on Instagram and TikTok and things, and it's Jordan Peterson, who is an academic out of Canada, and he is talking about how zebras aren't targeted until they're marked differently. And he basically says that it's a metaphor for people to keep their heads down, because researchers couldn't keep their zebras straight, and so they started putting red paint on their hind legs or numbering them, and after that, animals supposedly attack them. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Doesn't matter. But it's not true with the other inferences he was drawing. They're not going after a single thing. And I just found that interesting, because that video, yet again, played in my feed right after I read this story. And again, it was just talking about how, no, they're not targeting necessarily the weak. The weak get targeted by non-apex predators, by scavengers, and by lower level predators. It's these apex predators that have the massive speed advantage, the things like that. They just go right for the heart of the densest amount of the probability. And so it's interesting to see that either evolution or trial and error or genes somehow are telling them when the prime time is, statistically speaking, in a better way than, computers could model, so that they're getting birds, because they tried picking a random spot, and it's not 80% of the time that they get an intercept of these swarms. Doesn't work out that way. So it's kind of interesting to see what's going on here, and they're going to continue to pick that apart. So we'll see what happens. But thanks for tuning in, and this has been Fishtory episode number 129. Talk to you later. Back to you, Jess, at the Aquatic Morning Show. Alright, guys, episode 130, Martin County Marine Sanctuary Murder and Mayhem. That's kind of a melodramatic title that I came up with. But Martin County, Florida. In Martin County, the sheriff's office is investigating a burglary at the Florida Oceanographic Coastal Center that happened earlier this month. Now, deputies said that two brothers and their friends killed a tarpon, a full-grown old tarpon, and they stole a snapper out of this facility where they use the animals to educate the public, but two, they do research on animals there as well, like just study them in their natural habitat or look at their biology, things like that, how to take care of them. But surveillance video shows 18-year-old Giovanni Del Greco and 18-year-old Matteo Del Vecchio breaking into the center with a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old on August 5th. They're not being named because they're minors. And the sheriff said that they were trespassing around 4 p.m. when the center was closed. I don't know if that's supposed to say 4 a.m. or not, but they said people catch tarpon all the time. It's a game fish. They'll pop off a scale and they'll release the fish gently at worst, and that's all it is. It's just a gentle, nice way to go fishing, said the sheriff. And he said they caught this tarpon. They ripped the hook out through the lip so much that it forced part of the fish's throat out, and then they just left it there to die. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this sheriff in this county in Florida could probably care less that a tarpon is killed. But he's making it very melodramatic that they killed this tarpon. And I think it's terrible that they did. I mean, it's really crappy that these kids went in there, trash stuff and went fishing and then caught a tarpon and just left it there to die. Bummer. That is a bummer. But I just don't believe for a second that this sheriff cares about the tarpon. He cares that, you know, he's going to get a conviction. He's on the news. It's local news. It's being shown around Orlando and Tampa and Miami. So yeah. Anyways, so both adults have been arrested and booked. They've been identified. The 17-year-old has been served on a warrant, and the fourth teen has not yet been served or positively identified or charged yet. So deputies, believing this group was fishing somewhere before, they were at the center, then moved to the center, broke in, maybe they were drinking or something, it looks like, and that then they trashed the center. So there's no legitimate reason for having done what they did. In reality, it was just pure meanness, according to the sheriff. So, spokesperson with the Florida Oceanographic Coastal Center sent the local news channel there a statement to the public, basically to publish, and it says, as a nonprofit organization focused on environmental-based education, Florida Oceanographic Research Center is allowed to house animals at the Coastal Center through a strictly regulated permit for educational purposes and for conservation studies. Our conservation ambassador animals live on the site specifically to cultivate a love of nature and the environment, oftentimes with local children. The care and safety of these creatures is our top priority. These were not just animals, they were long-term members of our family who taught community members about wild marine creatures and how to protect them. The animals that were killed had lived with us since they were juveniles in the center, being born in the center, and this was their home. The amount of care, time, and effort we put into raising them is impossible to measure in hours or dollars. As an organization, we do not collect adult animals from the wild ever, and because of that, conservation ambassadors that we have had taken from us are irreplaceable, and we mourn their absence. So deputies said that the center has been a victim in the past to similar break-ins. In 2015, officials found that someone broke in and looks like they tried to ride a Nerf shark and ended up hurting it and cutting it in the process and breaking the tank. And in 2020, deputies said they're investigating when a stingray was injured and someone stole its barb, unfortunately, or took the barb from it. And somehow it sounds like the fish lived. Anyways, it says that the facility was doing everything it could with surveillance and fencing and, warning signs and all that, and that basically they were able to identify the suspects right away from their video footage. It was good quality video footage. So that's another moral of the story, is have good quality video footage, because we can't have nice things. It appears to us, although we can't get into their heads, but that they had every intention of just killing that tarpon and leaving it there. Now, this is interesting. Their bond has been set at $175,000 for the two teenagers that were over 18. Wow. I mean, you can manslaughter. You'll get out cheaper sometimes. They're taking this seriously. No joke in Florida. Anyways, as bad as it is, I mean, I'm glad they're taking it seriously, but I don't think they need to ruin these kids' lives. I don't know, especially if they took it home to eat or something like that. But it does sound like, pretty bad thing. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. It's pretty crappy when people do those things, but especially since it's a sport fish, I think it blurs the line of why do we treat certain animals nicely and then kill others by the millions? And it's something to think about. And what are we teaching our kids by that? Or maybe it doesn't matter. So let me know what you think. At the end of the day, it's because it's property that was worth a lot of money because they figured out how much time and energy could have theoretically been put into that fish, and then they charged them with vandalizing or destroying that property in the cost of that fish, which if I was in court, it'll get argued by the lawyer, but I was going to say I'd argue that one. But in any case, it is really crappy what they did, and I hope that, they have to go do some conservation work or, take some classes or whatever, but I hope they don't get thrown in jail for a decade, which I highly doubt they will. Anyways, I'm Alex Williamson with The Secret History, living in your aquarium on Fishtory on the Aquatic Morning Show. It's like Inception, there's 3 different levels, and I'll talk to you next time. Later, guys. Hey, everybody, how is it going? We are on episode 131. So, what do I have to say today? New Sri Lankan Aponogeton species has been discovered. So, the Aponogeton Kanangare, that's really hard for me to say, Kanangare is confirmed as new and novel genetically. So people were arguing this specimen was first found in 2016, brought to market in India from Sri Lanka, and then later to Singapore for sales in the exotic plant market. And they said, is this a new species? Is it not? And it happens to be a lovely purple and red or crimson color in the leaves when underwater, and dark crimson when above water in many of the phenotypes that they found of this plant. So Aponogeton canangariae is a new species of the Aponogeton family, and it was found in the Rakwana Hills of Sri Lanka, and is described and illustrated in a new species morphology description, saying that it's similar to the rigidifolius Aponogeton, but that it can be more easily distinguished morphologically because of the color of its inflorescence, being the crimson and purple color, and the fact that its rhizomes even have color at times. And that its flowers are a nice light purple all the way to a dark red. So Aponogeton canangare is a new species of Aponogeton saei, and that's like the larger group. But the nice hues on it, they think, is going to make it a hot Aponogeton on the market. And the nice thing with Aponogetons is you can hybridize most of them, especially like if it's from Sri Lanka. There's some in Africa, some in Southeast Asia, and some in India, as well as Sri Lanka, and Madagascar as well. And the ones that are near each other almost always can hybridize, and I'm not sure if they can all be forced to hybridize, but naturally many can hybridize. So this species is being formally named after a Dr. C.W.W. Kanangara from 1884 to 1969 are their life dates, and it was the father of free education in Sri Lanka. And they named the plant after him for his immense service on initiating the free education system in Sri Lanka, and for his tireless efforts to educate and advance technology, industry, and institutions of learning in the country. So I'll leave the info in my community tab for members if you guys want to look up the spelling and all that, or try to sound it out, or look up the guy who is the father of education in Sri Lanka, which sounds like a pretty good thing to be named. I mean, seems like a pretty good choice for naming it the Latin name. And if you're wondering how in the heck these names get changed from Kananganan to Kanangaranaei, there are kind of loose rules and ways you change names, and then there's even within certain cultures a way that you say a surname, or when you're distinguishing it or announcing it in public versus when you're just saying it to family informally, things like that that go into play. And I've done a whole episode on that on my normal channel. If you have any interest on Latin names and things, we did a whole live stream teaching you a bunch of cheat sheet info on how you can learn some Latin and Greek that these names come from. But when it's from a name, it gets kind of hard. And you can usually tell by 2 I's after the name. But if the name ends in an A, then oftentimes it's EAE or AEA in weird exceptions. So that's what happened here. And if it's named after a place, there's other rules. But cool enough that there's a new Aponogeton, and I'm curious if some of the new Crispus Aponogeton is actually this purple stuff that they're finding, or if they've already hybridized it, if it came as early as 2016. But now the formal paper has been published, and where people were saying, no, it's just a color morph, or no, it's Jacobsoni Aponogeton, and it just looks different because it's from southern Sri Lanka, high up in the mountains. Nope. Turns out genetically it is distinct and quite novel as a species. So pretty cool that it's its own thing, but it's still a Aponogeton, which means it is a tuberous plant that needs rich nutrients and submersed water most of the year, and then it can come out of the water and grow immersed. But the bulb needs to be in very rich nutrient, kind of dark black water conditions generally to thrive at its fullest. Oftentimes, though, the flowers on these plants are really pretty, so check out the pictures. If you're looking at identifying these, check out when they bloom. They're really easy to bloom in an aquarium with even like a Fluval 3.0 is enough light to do it. They live in pretty dark places within the rainforest oftentimes, and it's something I'd highly recommend checking out. And I definitely want to get my hands on one of these when they're in America. Alright guys, well, I will talk to you later, and I hope you enjoyed this week of Fishtory. Have an excellent week. Back to you, Jess. I'll see you guys later. Bye.